He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, this is The Alex Marlow Show, Hawaiian Shirt Friday today. Thanks for joining me. Glad to be here. Did you guys have a big party for Juneteenth yesterday? I had a big Juneteenth party. I actually had a party because I wasn't that busy, so I made fries. Fries are the big deal. You guys know I like to cook, but the fries, that's the big deal because you got to do the parboil first if you want them any good. So process starts very early in the day. Of course, I got the Wagyu beef tallow for cooking oil. So very maha. Robert Kennedy would have been proud. And then we toasted to Juneteenth. Like, why not? It's a, hey, look, guys, it's a really important, legit holiday that's not at all woke. I started the show yesterday, given my little Juneteenth history, and then I woke up to an article at Breitbart News with 9,000 comments on it. Black Lives Matter affiliate telling white folks it's time to pay reparations in a Juneteenth message, saying white folks. So it's like, could I ever come into the show and just unironically just say black folks? And now I'm going to demand them that they do something. All right, white folks, it's time to pay reparations. Commit yourselves to real reparations policies that hold accountable the government, white supremacist capitalism, and white people who continue to benefit from our generations of stolen labor. Slide your black friend some Benjamins. Make a check out to black liberation organizations like BLM, Grassroots, and go from there. So there you go. So the reparation stuff is just not going to happen. The only state that I think is actively trying to give out reparations is California, which was a free state. But are we going to parse out which black people are descendants of slaves and which aren't, and which ones have held slaves in their history and which haven't? Are we going to go to that level? Because it just doesn't seem like what happens when you find inevitably some of the poorest non-blacks were part of the slave owner class. So are they going to have to pay the richer black people? No one wants this headache. It's all just woke. And that's why the Juneteenth stuff was never going to work. And it was clearly designed just to compete with July 4th and other holidays, even though the idea of celebrating the end of the Civil War, the end of slavery, and the end of Republicans, when Republicans saved the slaves from segregationist Democrats. I'm all in on that, but that was not what Juneteenth was all about. So there you go. But I'll tell you one thing that is positive is that we've had a little bit more time to talk about some of the domestic agenda, in particular the ICE raids. Yesterday, you heard my recommendation. I'll give it again to any of you illegal aliens in the audience. Do not go to any more cockfights, picking up people at cockfights. Do not do that. ICE will be there. They will show up. But ICE agents are now facing a 500% increase in assaults. So this is data that's pretty much consistent with what we've been observing, but 5 times more likely for an ICE agent to get assaulted. They're getting their hands dirty, so I'm sure that's part of it. They're out there trying to round people up, but the left is normalizing this culture of violence while they tell us we're violent. I played that clip of Jasmine Crockett yesterday, which I've been thinking about nonstop since Misty pulled that for me yesterday on the show, how she was out there saying she's not safe. She's the safest woman in America. We will protect her. We need her content. We on the right, we will do whatever we can. I told you I will get the Proud Boys out there. I'll call them up. Figure it out. They will protect Jasmine. We need Jasmine safe. So she's a safe person. But in the meantime, if you just want to enforce customs, immigration and customs enforcement. So if you're enforcing immigration and customs, you are now in a deeply dangerous spot. This is one thing that the left just has never appreciated, is that our border agents, our Customs and Border Protection, CBP, people who are on the border is a very dangerous job. When the border's open, it's dangerous for those people. When we try to do deportations now, because the left has normalized this violence, it is now dangerous to be an ICE agent, and it shouldn't be. Their job is to enforce our laws. They are law enforcement. So the normalizing of the Nazi rhetoric, Stephen King out there saying ICE looking more and more like the American Gestapo. Stephen King, no one cares about his politics, I don't think, but just as an aside with him, Really just mind-blowing that he just gives he's the most generic lefty on social media when he is such a gifted storyteller and writer. I've read probably 15, 20 Stephen King books. They're not all hits, and I haven't read anything I've liked of his this century, so it's all older stuff, but truly someone who's touched by God with the gift of storytelling, and then he just goes online and just completely takes any sort of mystery or veneer that he's a special person and just throws it out the window with the worst possible takes. The guy's never had a good political take. But the left's climate of violence is very normalized, and just look for this as a theme this summer. There are rioters in Portland that we covered last night at Breitbart. I wonder if what the event was. Oh, I guess this was Wednesday night. Was this a pre-Juneteenth type deal? But they were assaulting law enforcement with fireworks, explosives. Department of Homeland Security shared the video, and they were targeting ICE. That was the whole thing. So 250 rioters launching fireworks, shining lasers at officers. 5 individuals were arrested, more were charged. A lot of harrowing footage that, I always forget this, is that we're a podcast now. So I should be forwarding this on so we can just watch some of the footage, because the video nature of the podcast. On radio, I couldn't play the footage, but it's not good. And the left is very normalizing of the violence. And then they use the classic projection where they will come out and they will say, it is us, we the conservatives, who are violent. Not true. It's not us. We are the peaceful ones. We only want peace. And so let's turn to, speaking of peace, let's turn to the big news of the day, which is Iran. Joel Pollak's going to join me in a little bit. He's our top Middle East reporter at Breitbart. We have great Middle East coverage, always have, but he's the most knowledgeable. And so we'll talk to him about what a regime change could look like in Iran. And I asked some questions of him. I give him the floor, but you guys know my take on this. Is regime change is very messy business, and we're not particularly good at it. But the Iranian regime, it just continues to bomb Israeli civilians. They've now had strikes on Haifa, hitting a historic mosque, injuring imams. So they're clearly not very precise. Ayatollah Khamenei posting the Zionist enemy is being punished. And this is because one missile out of like 27 that they fired got through to Israel, which has sustained very minimal casualties. It can't be a great way of life. I admit that. It's the, constantly in your bunker or living in fear, which I'm sure Israelis would like for this not to go on forever. But overall, this has been very minimal on the casualty front. And that's because of the precision of not just Israeli intelligence, but of their anti-ballistic missile technology is just unbelievable. I think that's partially why we're going to do our Golden Dome here, because it really, really is truly just a marvel what Israel's able to do to protect their citizenry, how they basically have war going on around them constantly, and they can still have a relatively thriving society. It's quite an accomplishment. And so the question is, what's America's role, and what were people anticipating? And I do think that there's a big fundamental misunderstanding of Trump's concept of America first being isolationist. It's just never been that way. Trump has always tried to emphasize being unpredictable. And I say this because there are all these people who would like to see what a regime change would look like mapped out before anything happens. Trump hates this. Trump is always trying to surprise people with a quick strategic bombing, taking out some of the bad guys. Think Soleimani, think Baghdadi. And then once that happens, then he feels like, I think he's in the driver's seat to be able to make whatever moves he needs to make. And recall this, I've gone through this on the show many, many times. He was better at standing up to Russia than the Obama administration was, for sure. We were told that Trump was really the Russian stooge, but he was the one who shut down the Nord Stream 2 and killed those Wagner troops in Syria. And he had put a lot of sanctions on Russia proactively, and he'd send weapons to Ukraine proactively. So he's unpredictable. And I think a lot of isolationists fundamentally have misunderstood Trump's the foreign policy, his true perspective here. So Trump will not be announcing any attacks. He will not be announcing if he wants regime change or to what level the U.S. would be involved. We're going to have to wait and see. I luckily I'm very well sourced, so I will try to get you the best updates I can from inside the White House as best I can on the show. But they're correct to not spill the beans and to keep people on edge and to see how people react. What Trump has done is he's announced that there's a 2-week ceasefire, so to speak, or 2 weeks for Iran to start complying. But what does compliance look like with Iran? It looks like full surrender. It's the no more nuclear development, no more enriching of these terrorists or funding these terror proxies. And that's going to be devastating. And they don't want to do that. And they don't want to let Israel win, which it would be tantamount to admitting that Israel's won. So they don't want to do that. So I think Trump is probably hoping that they become rational and realize the Iranian regime is not in a strong position. They're in basically an unwinnable war, and it's just a matter of time before they lose the war. But then the Ayatollahs are thinking, well, then that means that could be the beginning at the end of our reign. Whether or not America helps precipitate the regime change or not could be the beginning of the end. And they don't like that, but they got to come to grips with it, or else we could see strategic bombings. And I think that a lot more people in America who, in general, do not want a war with Iran, but back President Trump and support Israel, according to all the polling data. We support Israel. We back Trump in general. This is not black and white, but in general, the majority of Americans support Israel and trust Trump on this stuff, but don't want a prolonged war with Iran. So what does that look like? Could we see one of those strategic bombings, one of those 30,000-pound bombs, try to take out one of those nuclear facilities, in particular, the Fodor one, which I always mispronounce, Fodor, or whatever it is. I'm pronouncing it wrong, but that's the one. That's the big one where the main enrichment is taking place, and it's 300 odd feet below the ground. So can we get there? Sounds like it, but if we can't, it'd be a lot easier if they just said, all right, we give up. We cry uncle, and let's work together towards a peace. And then the Ayatollahs could say in power, and unless Israel wants to try to remove them, or if their own people want to try to remove them. It's very complicated what opposition party, and I'll ask Joel this when he gets here in a second. Most in Iran, most of the, if you're in the opposition, you get disappeared. And this is something that Whoopi Goldberg needs to understand this, because she's out there acting as though Iran's is a wonderful civil place. Check out this clip. We've had this. You may have heard this on a different show because we've had this for a couple days, but I haven't got around to playing it. Check this one out.
And it's slow.
But let's just remember, too, the Iranians literally throw gay people off of buildings. They don't adhere to basic human rights.
Listen, here's the thing. Let's not do that, because if we start with that, we have been known in this country to tie gay folks to the car.
Where the Iranian regime is today in 2025 is nothing compared to the United States.
Hanging black people. So
it is not even the same. I couldn't step foot during this.
Wait. That's not what you mean to say. It is the same.
No, it's not. The year 2025 in the United States is nothing like if I step foot wearing this outfit in Toronto.
Killed for I'm sorry.
No, I can't have my hair showing. I can't wear a skirt. I can't have my arms out.
I'm telling you,
I literally said it was up to the Iranian people.
Yes, it is up to them. And that's why I am saying that it is the same. Murdering someone for their difference is not good. Whoever does it, it's not good.
So it's just remarkable to see someone of such deep privilege just hate this country so much. That's Alyssa Farah Griffin, who is now an anti-Trumper, but worked for President Trump. And so she's not knee-jerk on the left. And she's noting that you can't, she's Iranian ancestry or Iranian family members. She's noting that you can't walk around the street dressed certain ways. There's no freedom there. There's stoning of women. There's oppression of children. There's torturing of children. There's executions over minor violations of perceived tenets of Islam. And Whoopi's like, it's as bad here for people who are minorities. It's just so you walk around with such contempt for this country, even though you're a person who gets to give opinions for lots of money on television and live and make such benefit from this country. It's sort of unbelievable to watch, and that's why we're always grateful for The View for providing such content.
So that's why I said you weren't saying what I heard was not what you meant.
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Not if you're black.
Guys, don't go to Tehran. Do not anyone at the table to go to Tehran.
Let me tell you about being in this country. This is the greatest country in the world. But
it's the greatest country in the world, but we oppress blacks to the level that the Iranian people are oppressed. It's I wonder, is this really the prevailing viewpoint? We need to get the unofficial black correspondent here. Misty, because I got to understand this thinking. Like, is this really a widespread viewpoint? Because I admit that the black people who live in my neighborhood and work for me at Breitbart, like this is just, it's so far-fetched to me that this would be the perception. Very dark if that's what's being broadcast, is that it's worse to be black in America than it is to be an Iranian under the Ayatollahs.
But yeah, I know that. And we all know that. But every day we are worried. Do we have to be worried about our kids? Are our kids going to get shot because they're running through somebody's neighborhood? They are not big deals, and I don't mean to say they're not big deals to you, because that's not women, what I meant.
And they are not doing well there either. They are not doing well in Iran. They are not educated. They cannot have property. They cannot leave States.
I'm talking about here.
Nobody wants to diminish the very real problems we have in this country. That is no one's intent.
Good.
But I think it's important we remember there are places much darker than this country and people who deserve rights.
Not everybody feels that way.
All right,
not everybody feels that way.
Not everyone feels that America is. It's amazing how we're talking about war in Iran and whether or not the Iranian regime needs to be deposed, and we just turn it to how horrible America is. It makes me think of this theme has come up about how unhappy liberals are in this country. John Nolte has written up a big study for us at Breitbart that we've got that everyone should check out about how unhappy liberals are relative to conservatives. A 60,000 person survey that was conducted. Who did this survey? Nate Silver analyzed it, who is the famed pollster, and so it's in his Silver Bulletin. I guess is this his survey? I got to figure out where the exact survey is, but you check it out at Breitbart. But they go through 60,000 people, and one of the most fundamental things that you could see is that conservatives are far more happy than liberals. And you see other things like religious people are happier. Which I think is not. I think that's a correlation. I think the fact that conservatives are more religious, I think that keeps you happy. What else do you draw on in your worst moments? Is for me, the thing that I draw on in my worst moments is that I'm not here just for this life. I'm here for the next life as well. The other thing is we're going to have more family members. The other thing I draw on is I'm not just here for me. I'm here for my family. So if you are just living alone without religion, then you're not going to be as happy of a person, because your darkest moments are going to just feel darker. Also, older people tend to get happier, which I think that's nice. But you look at all sorts of spectrums. Bisexuals or other tend to be less happy than gays and lesbians, which tend to be less happy than heterosexuals. So, there's lots of interesting things here, but political people who tend to skew conservative tend to skew happier. And by the way, money does buy happiness. So anyone who told you money doesn't buy happiness, it is sequential. The poor people track less happy, richer people track happier. And I will tell you, I don't know who came up with that money doesn't buy happiness. I will, because when I feel like I'm not flush, I feel more stressed out. So of course that makes me less happy. So what is don't we all agree fundamentally, if you have less money, you're more stressed? So absolutely, go get the bag. It'll make you happier. There are a lot of cell phone providers out there. I saw one the other night claiming that they share my values and, quote, stand for something. But what exactly do they stand for? They wave the flag, but they're not specific. This is why I chose Patriot Mobile, because I know exactly what they stand for and they aren't shy about it. Patriot Mobile stands for the lives of the unborn and actively participate in the March for Life. You guys who listen to my show, you know how much I love the March for Life. I used to live right in Foggy Bottom, where the March for Life would originate near the Lincoln Memorial every year. I look forward to it every year. These are great people and the exact type of people I want to support. Patriot Mobile donates millions of dollars to organizations that protect the unborn, and they stand for the Second Amendment, and they partner with organizations that actively fight for your right to protect yourself and your family. They honor and support our veterans and our first responders. It is the only Christian conservative wireless provider who truly shares your value. Patriot Mobile gives you freedom to choose the best network for you, because they have access to all three major networks, not just one. And right now, you can get a free month of service when you go to patriotmobile.com/Alex, or you can call 972-PATRIOT. So you keep your number, you can keep your phone, or you can upgrade. It's up to you. Talk is cheap. The only cell phone company that actually lives your values is Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/Alex for your free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/Alex. .com/Alex. But so a lot of liberals will rationalize that liberals are just more empathetic and that's why they're less happy. And I just don't find liberals more empathetic. I find them to be often less empathetic. But Nolte's got he gives some pretty good takes, but he thinks overall the left are basically Karens. It starts with their Karenism. How they have a totalitarian streak where they try to control people's behavior. I think this is totally true. I've been semi-obsessed, and I got to do a longer version of this down the road, but I've been semi-obsessed with this local community Karen account in my on Instagram in my neighborhood. It's got a couple 100,000 followers that covers the enclave north of LA that I live in. And they post all these things. They go around hall monitoring the whole neighborhood and trying to make it unpleasant for people. There's a very nosy streak in my neighborhood. I always sing the praises of my neighborhood and how great it is, because overall it is great. I walk the kids to school. It's incredibly diverse. People are happy. It leans conservative. It's very safe, very beautiful. All that stuff is fantastic. And we're in proximity to all the delicious food and great shopping in LA, but it's not a constant in your face thing here. And then we don't have to deal with all the crime and the filth that LA has. So it's mostly a great place to live. But there is this really wide Karen streak where a lot of people are just nosy and they poke into your business and they tattletale on people. And I can guarantee you those people are not the people who are voting Trump. And I had a friend whose parents got videoed. This Karen was harassing one of my neighbors' parents, so like 75, 80-year-old person who had apparently nearly run over some ducks on the road. Nearly. So no ducks were harmed in this. And this Karen puts this camera in my friend's dad's face, records it and uploads it to this website. And then all of a sudden, there's hundreds and hundreds of negative comments about how we need to find out who this person is and discipline them. No ducks were even harmed. There was nothing wrong that happened. So you apparently nearly hit a duck with your car, and now you're going viral on social media. This type of behavior, this nonsense, it only comes from the totalitarian streak on the left. Is you can't let people live. Imagine getting up every morning and walking around and thinking, I'm going to police my neighborhood to make sure no one drives too close to the ducks. It's just one of these things where it's a mindset that I think is you're not going to be able to come to grips with what it's like to be a human being and human nature if you are trying to police people at that level. It just does not work. It does not work. There is too much violence. There's too much rape. There's too much war. There's too much murder. There's too much stealing. There's too much cheating. There's too many bad things in human nature. So if you're at the level where you're hall monitoring people for everything, and that Karen culture is such a big, I think it's a big thing that is making people deeply unhappy. So just get away from that. It's not purely political in that case. So if you find yourself Karening, just try to let it go. Just let stuff go a little bit more sometimes with that stuff, and focus on the big picture stuff like religion, family. That stuff will help you. But the totalitarian streak that's so wide within the left is going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you very bossy. And the whole girl boss phenomenon. How do you think the girl bosses are voting? You think they're voting Trump? Of course not. So there you go. So Nolte's got a big breakdown of that, but it's just really noteworthy when you see someone as privileged as Whoopi, who's out there and she's just, complaining about this country. Michelle Obama, another person, and there's no more privileged American than Michelle Obama. Went to Harvard, married the president, got all these cush jobs to do nothing, making documentaries, and now she's podcasting, and all she does is complain about this country. Check this out.
That would be. You should have threw a boy in the mix. I would. I'm so glad I didn't have a boy.
Yeah.
Because he would have been a Barack Obama.
Baby Barack. It would have been amazing.
Ooh, no, I would have felt for him.
She was making fun of, she didn't want to have a boy with her husband. I mean, it's just so mean-spirited. It's such I get it if you're rizzing or razzing. We can't say rizzing anymore. Rizzing's a positive. But I get it if you're just razzing, goofing around with your spouse, but he's not there. And there's all of these rumors that their marriage is on the rocks. I don't know. Do you think he did something to her? Do you think he cheated? Do you think the Jennifer Aniston rumors are real? But she's just saying that she didn't want to have a boy it's such a very odd mindset. It's really fun. I was just talking last night at our Juneteenth party, me and Mrs. Dr. Marlow, how the diversity within our children, our 4 children, they're all so different. And it's just all wonderful to just explore all that. I don't understand why of course, you have to be lucky to get this opportunity, and you have to have a spouse, and then you have to have both boys and girls to get that sort of diversity. And not everyone's going to get that lucky, but it is a blessing to get to raise both types, and just to make it just such an attack on the husband. Who's Barack Obama? So pretty wild. So just all these privileged people walking around hating this country, really noteworthy. But there is someone who could save us. There is someone who could save the Democrats, perhaps. Not us, I guess, but save the Democrats. It's Hank Johnson. So if that name rings a bell, he's the congressman who thought that perhaps Guam could tip over if too many people were standing on one side of it. That is one where, if you're in my audience, I imagine you've heard that clip at least once, either from me or from Dennis Prager. That was one of Prager's greatest hits. That is one of the absolute just bangers that Prager would play all the time. Pointing out also not only that he said that Guam could capsize if too many people stood on one side of it, but he was saying this in a congressional hearing in front of I think it was a general or an admiral or something, and he took it with a straight face and just answered the question. So we got to have that one in the can, Misty. We just got to be able to call on that one from time to time. Yeah, I should have asked. I should have asked. It's my fault. I'm blaming myself, but we got to have it for the future. But anyway, Hank Johnson is back, and he has got a song. He's got a song that all of you, maybe you don't know you need to hear it, but I'm going to play it for you.
I'm compelled with a new guitar and with some thoughts about that old song, Hey Joe, to give some commentary on where we are now. Hey, Trump, where you going with that gun in your hand?
Okay, so Hey Joe is a Jimi Hendrix song. Hank Johnson, I'm guessing, is like a beginning a guitar. I mean, I used to play guitar. This is kind of the sound you would get within, the first year, your intro to guitar class, your 8 weeks, 20 minutes a week type deal. Like this is not impressive playing, but he said, "Hey Trump" so far. So let's see where he goes with these lyrics.
Hey Trump, where you going with that gun in your hand? I'm going down the street and shoot down democracy. You know I want to be a king someday.
Seriously, email me if the King stuff is working. It just seems like they really need to hire some new brand people. He got democratically elected 7 months ago. It's like, what is he doing? Just enforcing the law? So we got a victory at this 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit, which is the worst court for conservatives, allowed for Trump to control the National Guard in California. So basically, Trump is all good to use a National Guard, which, of course, we all knew that, but even sometimes the court does not act appropriately. And they did in this case. So what is he doing that makes him like a king? He doesn't defy any of the court orders because he wants to enforce immigration laws. That makes him a king. What else is he doing that makes him a king? Or do they think that branding is good? It is pretty amazing that he has, I don't know, maybe it's kind of cool to be called the king, right? I mean, is it really that bad of an attack? I know we have a democracy, but it is, you know how in Canada, they have a king, I guess. Did they say the King of England's the king of Canada? So they couldn't do the No Kings protest. They had to do a No Tyrants protest. But again, he won the election by a lot. Every swing state, popular vote, his policies are broadly popular. So just calling him a king without any evidence he's a king, does that work? Oh, he's shredding now.
I'm going down and shoot democracy down.
He's going to shoot democracy down.
You know I want to be the king someday.
Woo! All right, it's growing on me.
Donald Trump, take our democracy down, take it down to the ground. Hey, Trump. We won't let you take our democracy down, burn it down to the ground.
This is a U.S. congressman. I mean, this is what they do when they're so out of power that they have no ability to legislate at all. They're not a factor in any of the legislation that we're doing. It's just awesome. Really, really awesome. And I'm thank you for this content. That's what I'm saying, that these people are all safe. We would never harm Hank Johnson. We'd never harm Jasmine Crockett. We absolutely want these people to live in comfort because we need them to keep doing this silly stuff. This is, I guess, what you do because they can't accomplish anything legislatively. So, all right. It's kind of catchy. It kind of makes me want to hear the Hendrix version. All right. Other news that's going on that I will bring up that is just to round out some Israel-Iran stuff. So we're waiting 2 weeks. We'll get more with Pollock here, but the rhetoric is so spicy out of Iran, and that's what's really interesting is that if they continue this sort of rhetoric without acknowledging that they're going to have to wind down the nuclear program completely, then there's going to be more bombing, and perhaps America's going to have to get involved, which is complicated because regime change, we don't know what's next. There really isn't even a major opposition party. There's really fractional. Everything is sort of factioned off, and that's going to be tough to pull off. But the rhetoric is just so intense. We saw this prominent this prominent advocacy group, which I guess is affiliated with some Jews, but I guess secular ones, are calling for a free Palestine. They've called for genocide against Jews. We get a story on this from Joshua Klein at Breitbart, but it's just, this is going to be a Times Square billboard. It's just wild. The hatred of the Jews is just unbelievable. Okay, let's move forward with a couple other things. Here's some good news. The U.S. Navy recruiting has now completed their goal for fiscal year 2025 with months to spare. Our good friend Christina Wong, who was our former Pentagon correspondent at Breitbart's the spokeswoman over there, which is pretty cool. But you can thank President Trump, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth for that. I said this when Hegseth was put up. One of the things that was so cool about him is that he's the type of guy that you would want to actually work for. So that is, I think, a really, really big deal. And then Musk is back to smearing Trump officials. So I'll tell you, that guy needs some help. He's going after Sergio Gore, who I've known for 20 years. He calls him a snake. I guess Sergio handed Trump some Oppo research against Musk that made it so that Trump had nominated this guy who was a liberal for NASA, who Musk liked, and then Trump pulled it. I guess Sergio had given him the research for it. It's just one of these things where I don't have this instinct that so many people have to broadcast every thought. I don't know why Musk calling out Sergio Gore helps Musk at all. So Sergio's in charge of hiring for Trump, but he's an inner circle guy. He's around a lot. I just understand that it just feels not smart. Like if you have something negative to say about him, is it working for you just to put it out there? It just makes a lot of it cuts in your own coalition, and he needs a big coalition because he's got to sell a lot of cars. Tesla has inked its first deal to build China's largest grid-scale battery power plant, according to CNBC. So they're going to be, I don't know what grid scale means. Maybe one of you guys can fill me in, but it sounds big. So grid, I guess, would be for like a government. So it'd be that level. So a battery powered power plant for China. So he does huge business in China. This was always a problem with Musk. It was always a risk. And so now we have that to think about with him. So remember, we're not going to Mars, but he will cut deals with China. And he keeps attacking Trump people. So just note that he was never MAGA. He was very helpful in the campaign. I'm glad he bought X. But he's never MAGA. He's a confused individual who does a lot of good, but he's not a political leader. Last one for today is something that I probably should have tied in with the left being less happy than the right. The former Nickelodeon star JoJo Siwa, who was supposed to be like world's happiest kid or something. That was how she was branded. But she was pressured to come out as a lesbian as a minor. And she did all this pride stuff, and she's wearing all these rainbow hair and rainbow outfits over the years, and she dances and smiles and seems like a nice person, but she came out as LGBTQ and she had all these profiles written about her. It was a big dramatic thing, and she was pushed out there. And then now at 22 years old, she's in love with a guy and they're thinking about getting married. So someone named Chris Hughes, there's lots of adorable photos of them floating around. So as it turned out, she wasn't gay. Turned out she was straight, and the groomers who are part of, I mean, she was a Nickelodeon, which could be, this is the thing about Disney, and it was sometimes with you guys that I will say this, that this is really important. Disney is terrible in a lot of ways. Their latest movie, or Pixar movie, Elio, by the way, this is coming out, and no one likes this movie very much, and it's not going to do well at the box office. I do root against Disney, but they're actually arguably better than a lot of the other competitive kids networks. If you watch the kids entertainment on Netflix, it is also woke and it is dumb. It's significantly dumber than the Disney programming for kids. And it's got a lot of woke stuff too. I think the number one Netflix thing is Miss Rachel, who is there's a big scandal with her being super woke, which we can get into more at a different moment. But wow, I mean, seriously, this is the entirety of what content is being made for kids. But when you see someone from Nickelodeon, all these people who were either Disney stars or Nickelodeon stars when they were younger, they don't turn out great. It's a tough lifestyle, but to be pressured to come out as a lesbian when apparently you weren't when you're a child, very wild, and it shows you the level of grooming amongst these kids organizations. And that's the type of stuff you start ruining people's minds with that stuff when they're young. If they do not have a strong family, if they do not have God in their life, they're going to have a really tough time getting by. So hopefully this works out for her, for JoJo Siwa, and very odd how it came to this, that she was pressured. What evil individuals would pressure someone to come out as a lesbian as a child when they really weren't? Really strange people, and people should investigate this. It really should be investigated at that Nickelodeon. If it was Nickelodeon people or if it was one of her handlers, but a lot of preying on children going on. And so let's not get too distracted by non-issues so we can get back to fighting the fights that matter. All right. Let's bring in Joel Pollak. We're going to talk what a regime change would look like in Iran and what America's role could be. Check it out. You've heard me talk about efforts from the legacy media to stop you from accessing shows like mine. They do it by limiting spectrum that's available to consumers like you to access shows like this. They actually claim it's a national defense issue, which is a bit of a stretch if you think about it. And Trump isn't buying it either, and neither is Senator Ted Cruz. In the big, beautiful bill, Republicans have heard your voice and are providing more spectrum. So what does that mean for you? It can reduce your monthly broadband bill and preserve your ability to watch, listen, and stream the content that you choose, not what's chosen for you by some cable provider. The sale of this spectrum will also generate billions of dollars to reduce our national debt. Don't let the giant cable providers and legacy media continue to filter your information. Tell your senator and member of Congress to work with Senator Ted Cruz and President Donald J. Trump to expand spectrum and end the legacy media monopoly for good. You can learn more at endthecableopoly.org. That's endthecableopoly.org. All right. One of my favorite people is Joel Pollak, who is one of our senior editors at Breitbart, the senior editor at large. He's also the author of many excellent books. The latest is Trump 2.0, which goes into the drama of the first 100 days, which really was unbelievably dramatic. A great book concept there for Joel. And he hosts Breitbart News Sunday in the evenings on Sundays on SiriusXM. You can get that also on the SXM app. And Joel, I know we don't have a ton today, but a ton of time today because I know you're running around scrambling, leading our Middle East coverage. But we had a really interesting discussion on Breitbart Confidential, which is the show I do for our premium members at Breitbart, our Fight Club members, about regime change. And I've been thinking about it all week. And I just wanted to give this audience a little bit of a taste of that. And it's one of these things where it's nice to try to put yourself in a very clear position and think I'm pro or against, it's black, it's white, but it's not really how it goes. These things are ridiculously complicated. There's downstream effects of every decision, and I just want to explore some of that today. So where are you at on a personal level? And then I want to kind of explore what the various options look like.
So First of all, I think we need to look back at the first week of this war and realize just how incredible Israel's achievements have been. If you had told anybody 2 weeks ago that Israeli jet fighters would not only be able to make the journey to Iran, but would also knock out Iran's military leadership, target Iran's nuclear sites, and have complete freedom of operation in Iranian skies, it would have been almost unbelievable. And it's a testament to the strength of the Israeli military, the professionalism of Israeli intelligence, and the resilience of the Israeli home front. Because remember, Iran has been sending dozens of ballistic missiles to Israel every night. Most of them get intercepted, but some don't. The impacts are very severe, and Israelis have had to be very united and resilient in dealing with the trauma of those attacks. But in terms of regime change, the Iranian regime is an odious regime. For half a century, it has been anti-American, anti-Israel. It has sponsored terrorism around the world. It's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, maybe more. And it is committed to destroying Israel, which is why it created what it called a ring of fire around Israel by sponsoring all these terror groups, arming them, funding them, encouraging them for so many years until it all exploded on October 7th with the Hamas attack on Israel. Nobody will miss the Iranian regime. It's also completely awful to its own people. It has suppressed many internal uprisings quite brutally, including uprisings for women's rights and so forth. So no one thinks the Iranian regime should stick around in any moral sense. But as Americans, we've had some very bad experiences with what happens in the aftermath after you go into countries and defeat terrible regimes. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And the most recent memories we have are of Afghanistan, where it decidedly did not work. And so Americans, I think, are understandably very skeptical of regime change as a military goal. Neither the United States nor Israel has said that regime change is a goal. Israel has said something very specific, which is, on the one hand, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says they're not trying to topple the Iranian regime. They would like to see that happen, but it's up to the Iranian people themselves. And then, on the other hand, his defense minister, Israel Katz, says that some of the airstrikes in Iran right now are aimed at making the Iranian regime unstable, at destabilizing the regime and its ability to govern. So it looks like what the Israelis are trying to do is to disrupt the Iranian regime and create an opening for it to be replaced, although they're not targeting, at least not yet, they're not targeting the lead Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Trump is also being very careful about regime change. He understands that that's something people didn't vote for. They didn't want more regime change wars, as it said. But on the path to stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which is Trump's explicit goal, it might be that the Iranian regime falls because the regime is so dedicated to hating America and hating Israel and to developing nuclear weapons as a means of protecting itself that once it has failed this spectacularly in something it's poured its country's wealth into instead of building up the country for so many decades, then it'll lose, I think, not only its legitimacy, it never really was legitimate, but it'll lose its ability to scare its own people and justify its own repression against them. And I think you may start to see some effort to replace it from within. What that looks like, we don't really know. And I think it's a valid question to ask what happens if the Iranian regime disappears. What replaces it? We don't really know.
Okay, so this is you're already a step ahead of me because this is exactly what I want to discuss. Because I think in a vacuum we like the idea of the Iranian regime going down. They hate America, and they do not, I think, preside well over their own country in many ways. They are very openly at war with us. Everything is just horrible about them. But then the question is, this is the big thing that we discussed earlier today with our editorial team, Joel, is there even an opposition party there? It doesn't feel like there is.
There are some opposition groups, and the United States has backed them in some form or another, but they're also on the fringe, and Iran has been very good at suppressing popular dissent. Many Iranians who oppose the government are in exile and not really able to organize on the ground. There's also the question of the Shah, the hereditary monarch who ruled Iran, was essentially installed by the Americans and then was abandoned by the Americans under Jimmy Carter. There's a question of his family wanting to come back and rule. We don't really know what post-Ayatollah Iran looks like just yet. It could be a democracy, could be a constitutional republic, could be a monarchy of some kind. We have no idea. And it's probably a good time to start having those conversations. It's not up to us as Americans, but we will probably have something to say about it. Maybe we can play a positive role, but we also need to start asking the question, because what we don't want is a vacuum that is exploited by terrorists and extremists and so forth.
Right. So that's exactly the concern. So I do feel like ultimately that's why my position, I guess, is I guess on a personal level, I'd like to see it. I just don't feel like that America needs to spend a lot of time on it, much less blood and treasure on it, just because of the nature of we don't really have a good sense of what it's going to look like in the end. But we're the Iranian people on this. The Iranian people, what do they think of their current of the current regime? Because everything I can glean, Joel, is that this is not a regime that's embraced by the public. But then you see some of these rallies that are out there, and I don't know how they came together, but some of the rallies that we're seeing seem like there's at least some people who like it.
Well, there are no demonstrations in Iran that aren't officially sanctioned and promoted by the Iranian regime. So there is a small percentage of Iranians who support the regime. Many of them are connected to the regime. Remember, in any society today, any modern society, and Iran is in some ways a modern administrative state, you're going to have a significant portion of the government or a significant portion of the economy that is simply the government, people who work for the government, people in government jobs. So that accounts for some of it. And it does appear there's a small segment of Iran's population that shares some of the views of the Ayatollahs. But the vast majority of Iranians do not support the regime. They've just found a way to get along despite the regime. And I think they would much prefer something new. However, again, there doesn't seem to be any leadership that's emerged, at least in an identifiable way from the outside. So we don't know who's going to replace the Ayatollahs. I think that's one of the reasons President Trump would prefer to do a deal, leave the Ayatollahs in charge of the administrative state, avoid the kind of institutional collapse that we saw with the end of Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq, keep things orderly, but just get rid of the nuclear program and let the regime decay and eventually disappear over time, which I think it will. That leaves you more time to figure out how to rebuild in the aftermath. And again, it's not the United States that has to rebuild. It's the Iranian people, but they have to be able at least to have the space to ask these questions openly. You can't really plan for a post-Ayatollah Iran in Iran, because once you start talking about that, they'll imprison you for life. So it's a conversation that has only been happening outside Iran to the extent it's been happening at all, and it's still in its infancy.
So do you think that I want to cover a couple other quick things with you, Joel. So there's this discussion that only America could take out this Fordo. I would mispronounce it. Frodo. Yeah, this facility that's apparently 30 stories underground. We need our 30,000-pound bomb. I'm always skeptical when everyone's talking about the same stuff, and everyone's talking about this exact same scenario, and that always makes me feel like it's not real for whatever reason. But do you think that's true? And second of all, do you think that as an addendum to that, is that kind of why Trump would rather just see a surrender, and so we could just go in, dismantle it without having to drop a 30,000-pound bomb, which I don't know if a 30,000-pound bomb penetrates that deep. It probably does, but I don't know. I'm not I don't minor in bomb expertise when I'm not doing the show.
I don't know that it's the only answer. Trump hinted at a different response, which was that the Fordo nuclear facility could be destroyed after a peace agreement or a surrender agreement, really, where you'd have the international community go in and destroy the Iranian nuclear sites. And in that case, you could actually do a controlled demolition, or you could seal it off, or you could do something that makes it inoperable without having to cause destruction, potential radiation leaks, and that kind of thing. I have been reading about this 30,000-pound bomb, which would need to be delivered by a strategic bomber, some kind of aircraft that the Israelis don't have. And I've read that it would essentially vaporize the mountain. That's how strong this bomb would be. Again, that might be necessary. I'm sure there's some people who would like to see what it looks like to use a weapon like that. There may be some other geopolitical impacts of a weapon like that. Maybe we'd want to use it to let China know that we're capable of it, to let Russia know we're capable of it, to let our enemies know and our allies know, and basically make a statement. In some ways, the atomic bombs dropped on Japan at the end of the Second World War were that kind of statement. That's not the only reason we dropped the bombs, but it was also to send a signal to the Soviet Union that we were going to be the superpower in a Cold War situation after the Second World War. Of course, the Soviets then developed atomic weapons of their own, but the ideas might be broader than Iran here. I just think that there may be other ways to neutralize the Fordo facility. The Israelis, for example, were able to bomb the power plant that feeds a different nuclear facility, the one in Natanz, and that apparently destroyed the thousands of centrifuges there, even though they were underground. Israel didn't hit the underground facility, but it did cause damage there because it cut off the power. So there may be other things to do if you want to disable the nuclear activities that are going on at Fordo rather than simply bombing it.
Right. That was my main question. So about that, because I don't. Again, it feels like understanding why that's the case. I think it's big. One other thing, Joel, I wanted to get your take on. I know you got to run here, but the Whoopi Goldberg basically saying that blacks are more oppressed in America than Iran oppresses its citizens, particularly women. I mean, I read a lot of instances of child torture, or women being stoned. Are those all fake, or did Whoopi just miss all those? I'm asking, what is your quick response to that for those of you who might be at a barbecue this weekend and that anecdote might come up?
Yeah, well, what she said is just ill-informed and untrue. I think where she's coming from is the idea that we should be skeptical of human rights justifications for military intervention. I think that's the best gloss on her comment that I can give. And she's not alone in feeling that way. I think the point she was trying to make was we have problems here at home. Why are we undertaking a military adventure potentially just because
you're so charitable? That's so
people
sweet
are
of you.
so. Well, I mean, I think that's where she's coming from. I've had to be charitable in a lot of these debates.
No, it's good. It's a better way to debate. I don't like the way of debating where. And by the way, if you don't agree with me, you are worse than Satan. I'm like, I don't like that way of debating.
Yeah. So she's wrong about that. I don't think there's anything comparable to Iranian repression. Iran's one of the most oppressive countries in the world. If you disagree with the government, you simply disappear. You can be executed for having the wrong view, and people are executed. Nothing like that happens in the United States, at least not officially. Maybe people have ideas about how it happens unofficially, but there's nothing like that at all. In fact, generally speaking, the poorest people in the United States are rich in global terms. So it doesn't mean everyone is enjoying life in the U.S. and doesn't mean everyone has what they need or what they should have. But relatively speaking, on an income basis alone, the poor in America are much wealthier than, in some cases, the rich of some other countries. So you get into trouble when you start making those kinds of comparisons. I think what she's getting at is just a skepticism of people who say, well, we should go in and do regime change because they're a terrible government. They are. And, you know, there is a humanitarian interventionist argument. It's just that people have never made it before with Iran because Iran was seen as so powerful until the last 7 days when Israel basically dismantled the regime's defenses. The regime really should take the deal if Trump is offering it. It's the only way for the regime to survive. They may have some other different view. It does seem to me like they're being led by fanatics, and we are realizing just how fanatical they were or are. You know, when you look at, you know, I hesitate to make Hitler comparisons because the joke, of course, is that every argument online ends in Hitler. But if you look at what Adolf Hitler was doing as he was losing the Second World War, he was still diverting trains to concentration camps and death camps. He was so committed to murdering Jews that he often didn't use the trains to transport troops and weapons. And the Iranian regime has something of that in it, that they are so committed to death to America that they won't even negotiate directly with America. I was reading that the foreign minister of Iran said, I'll talk to these Europeans, but I won't talk to the Americans. You won't talk to the Americans? I mean, the Americans are the ones who could stop the war, basically by telling Israel to stop the war. You're not going to talk to the Americans? I mean, it's insane, and it's self-destructive. So I think that's partly what we're dealing with, is a fanatical regime.
All right. I already said last question, but really last question. What do you make of Trump's 2 weeks to slow the spread type approach? I kind of don't hate it. A lot of people look at it as a half measure, but I feel like it gives Israel 2 more weeks to pummel Iran and Iran to come to senses and maybe roll over. So I think it kind of works, but a lot of people are calling it a taco situation where Trump is caving. So, but what's your quick take?
I think it's right. He bought himself time. Obviously, the decision to go to war is very difficult for him politically and otherwise. But really, the best situation for the world is one where Iran now takes a deal and agrees to end its nuclear program. That is the best situation for the world.
Yeah.
Is it the ideal situation that we could get to if unicorns could fly on rainbows? No. I mean, we'd love the regime to disappear and be replaced by
something great. No refugee crisis. They stop they stop cooperating with China so much. Yeah, no, there is a better scenario than the most likely scenarios.
Right. So I give Trump a lot of leeway there. Also, the only people I've heard complaining about it are Israelis who say we have to live with the threat of bomb shelters and missile attacks for the next 2 weeks. But the missiles are decreasing in number and frequency and intensity. So there is at least that consolation. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think so too, but we'll have to keep an eye on it for 2 weeks, I guess. All right, Joel Pollak, amazing stuff. Read everything Joel writes at Breitbart News, and don't miss his Sunday show on SiriusXM as well, or any of his books. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
That is today's show. Thank you to all of you in the audience for subscribing and for sharing the content with 10,000 friends and family members. Thanks to producer Misty, and we'll talk to you next time.